Clay, I know it's easy to pile on Neelix with his petulant jealousy and his inability to manage his relationship on this ship with Kes, because every time she talks to some young stud, he flies into a jicklum of rage, as you said last episode.
Yeah.
Not quite, but he gets close. But I have a question. Mm-hmm. I know Neelix is being ridiculous and being petty and being jealous and everything like that, but what does Tom Paris think he's doing, actually? I'm like, I know everyone hates Neelix and thinks that he's extremely jealous and sort of distastefully jealous, but I think Tom Paris has a little bit of blood on his hands in this whole thing too, because when he leaves the dining hall or whatever, after he says goodbye to Kes, he gives Neelix a look. He gives him a look. I recognize that look, and then he walks off, and it's like, I think Neelix is at least somewhat justified in what he's doing there.
You've seen that look many times right before your girl has been stolen by the other guy at the bar. Tom
Paris, back off, my friend. This is not your place. Don't give me you're trying to be friendly with your lettuce or whatever routine.
You never know. He might just be one of those guys that doesn't actually know how to turn it off. So even though he's just being nice, it comes across as he's, got lascivious intentions.
Yeah. I don't trust him. I don't trust that Tom Paris. Get back to driving the ship.
I mean, based on his program from in the holodeck, I wouldn't trust him either.
No. Neelix is overreacting, but it's an understandable reaction, I think, is the long way to go about saying this. Let's get to Elogium, which sounds like a currency in a sci-fi universe, but it is the fourth episode of the second season of Star Trek Voyager. It came out on September 18th, 1995. Teleplay goes to Kenneth Biller and Jerry Taylor. Story credit goes to Jimmy Diggs and Steve J.K., directed by Heinrich Colby. In-universe date is 48921.3, which was 2371. And this
real quick. What was the writing credits again?
Teleplay is Ken Biller and Jerry Taylor, who are traditional standbys in the show. Story credit is Jimmy Diggs and Steve J.K.
Is Jerry Taylor a woman?
Jerry Taylor is a woman, yes.
Okay, because I was going to say.
Jerry Taylor is one of the three co-creators with Berman and Piller, and she is a female holdover from TNG.
I was going to say, to not have a single woman on the writing staff for this episode, it wouldn't shock me, given this was 20-something years ago.
Well, that was the Kira pregnancy. We went through that, where it was an all-male writing staff writing Kira's pregnancy, and it came across as completely absurd. But this is a little bit different. We can say that Jerry Taylor was present, and as far as I know, she has a vagina. In this episode called Elogium, the Voyager encounters a swarm of spaceborne aliens while Kes and Neelix must decide whether to have a child. They do have to decide that. So we get Kes and Neelix back again. We get a little bit of a sci-fi B-plot where these little space slug things are flying around and the Voyager gets sucked right into them. And basically, the main takeaway is that this is an episode all about sex, baby. So let's talk about you and me. And, I think my takeaway is that I wish this was an episode where the content was treated a little bit more seriously. I think all the downsides to this one are in how they choose to talk about what they want to talk about. And I think at its core, there's actually some really interesting stuff that they could have talked about in this. And it's mostly the way that the Kes stuff is played as see if I can sum this. So it's the idea of having a family and sex life on the ship and everything, and Voyager and the crew having to deal with whether or not a family is something that this ship should push. That's all well and good. It's just that the sci-fi thing of what happens to Kes is so ridiculous that it makes it almost a comedy at times.
Sure.
And it's not very funny. And it's also not as interesting as the serious nature of, Janeway's dilemma, Tuvok's dilemma. Even if you take it 100% seriously, the Neelix and Kes dilemma, if you want to push it that hard to say that there's something serious that could be considered there. I don't know. It feels like a childish take on what could have been a really interesting episode.
Yeah, I thought the stuff that they were talking about was pretty interesting as far as, everything you're saying there. The ethics and responsibility of and the practicality of having kids on a starship, especially one that's, slated to be flying for 75 years.
Yeah.
I didn't think, I see what you're saying with the Kes stuff, but I didn't think that they were trying to play it for laughs at all.
Even when he picks her up and she's like shoving food in her mouth and he's carrying her out, stuff like that.
I guess I kind of missed that part. But once she starts going into her whatever it's called,
Elogium, her phase of Elogium.
I had a flashback that I was being the Star Trek equivalent of what's the thing Trump said where he's like, how they're down there. They bleed down there.
Oh, right.
Whatever he said to Megyn Kelly, I don't know. But like once it gets into that stuff,
I don't know anything about their cycles, Clay. So let's stay here.
Once it got into that stuff, it seemed like it was less comedy and more. They were trying to really drive home the point that this was a big decision.
Yeah.
So having her, the process by which she can have a child be very long and very arduous.
Yes. You have a long time to make your decision, but it's a quick decision nonetheless. You can, as Neelix says, you can sleep on it and stuff. Like that's what I think that's the comedy to me is when she's like, there's 50 hours and he says, well, that's great. We can sleep on it. And then he just leaves, and he goes off somewhere.
He was, I got to say, I guess they were playing it for laughs. Yeah, but he came off as kind of a dickhead.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. But I think that his character has no choice because he's like, the constraint of this about them needing to make a decision is really kind of comical, silly, and really undermined when you have to do it so quickly and you don't even know that these characters have been really working on this as a thing. So It just comes across as like, in no way does it seem the right, and that's the sci-fi thing of Kes, where it's like, Kes is like, this is the only time I'm ever going to get pregnant, so we have to treat it seriously, even though this is an absurd thing to treat seriously at this point. It undermines the decision to me because it makes it seem more, like, less of an interesting choice or something, because Neelix is kind of forced into it, and it doesn't feel like any decision he makes is actually a real good decision on his part.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of wish that I mean, she kind of comes to this decision on her own, obviously, but I kind of wish Neelix had pushed back a little bit in their back and forth and been like, I don't know if you're doing this for the right, you seem to want to do this just to do this. I don't know if you're doing this because you actually want to do this. But she comes to that conclusion herself, obviously, when she's with the doctor and whatnot. But I think there was more stuff they could have get into that was a little bit more had a little bit more meat on the bone. I actually in the final scene when she comes back into the mess hall there, I thought that they were going to completely sidestep having to one of them to come up with an answer. I thought it was going to just be like, as soon as they left the slug party, everything went away and went back to normal. So like they never had to really make the decision, which I guess it did actually happen. But on top of that, Kes did say that she decided not to go through with it.
Yeah.
I wish that they had that scene. Well, two things. I guess it's part of the same thing. Basically, I feel like they pulled up a bit at the end where they could have had a really good scene where Kes actually makes that decision. And the two of them kind of have to grapple with it in the moment instead of kind of coming in after the fact and having her kind of couch it with the fact that, her childbearing, whatever, could happen again because it was artificially triggered by this thing. So like I guess I wish the decision they had made was more final and was more like they really did have to make a hard decision. So if she says no, then there is a really good chance that she will never, it's just a hard no and it will not happen,
Yeah. Yeah. I guess a lot of my trouble comes from the fact that it doesn't feel like this is enough time for them to have a serious like story about this stuff. It comes out of nowhere, like the
Yeah.
Her phase that she's in, heat, for lack of a better term now, like she's in her cycle. And this is the like it's played up as kind of a sci-fi mystery for about 10 minutes of the episode, and then it's revealed that this is what's actually going on.
Did it have anything to do with the fact that she was eating bugs? Or is it just that her metabolism shot up because she was in that God, I feel like a doctor in the 50s
state.
Trying to figure out how to talk about this.
No, and she's I think it's just that's all a byproduct of her entering her cycle, or like pregnancy cycle, is that she needs the nutrients. So that guess by Neelix was actually the correct answer, and it wasn't just a weird sci-fi thing going on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just don't think I would be happy with any outcome that these two came up with. Like, if they decided to have the baby, I think that's a bad idea. The fact that they don't decide to have the baby, it kind of feels just trite by the end of it. I just feel that Neelix, throughout his little journey here, is so dysfunctional and like off base of what he at one point he says, "I hope I have a son so I can teach him romantic techniques." And it's like, you're in this spot where you're like, I feel like Neelix needs a season to learn about stuff, and like if whatever he decides here is bad, honestly, the saving grace of the episode is this conversation with Tuvok, which was very nice, about his kids. And even then, I feel like Neelix has a kind of like social autism there, where he comes in and is like, he's very friendly and jovial, asking Tuvok about his family that he's not seeing any longer. It's like there's no delicacy of bringing it up. And the reason I like the scene is that Tuvok actually portrays like he talks like a Vulcan and walks like a Vulcan. He has a kind of, he hints that he's actually sort of more troubled by what's going on than he lets onto it. But it was just weird. It was just, Neelix never felt right. It never felt like it was taking any of this particularly seriously. And I wish that the episode had more focused on Janeway and stuff. Like the decision to have what Janeway has to decide is far more interesting than what these guys have to decide.
Yeah, I just can't take Neelix seriously, full stop.
Yeah.
So when it comes to him being jealous and like, on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, I'm this weird alien. This is my girlfriend Kes. But it's fine. It works in that thing. But when it gets down to like, should we sire a child together?
Yeah.
While I am being weird and possessive about it, it's like, all right, this isn't as fun as it was before. And I don't know if you as a character are equipped to handle how serious this actually is.
What you're talking about, yeah.
Which, honestly, I actually thought that this was going to be where they got rid of Kes, frankly.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought it was going to be like, the jealousy plus the fact that he clearly wasn't ready to have this conversation, she was going to actually leave the ship. I don't know why I thought that, but it just seemed like maybe they might go that way.
Seems like an off-ramp for her a little bit, maybe, or she could just hook up with someone else. You could see it as a potential breakup with Neelix episode, I think.
Yeah,
is possible.
Definitely. Yeah, totally. I thought she was good. I think she's pretty good. I like Kes so far. I know she gets kind of ragged on.
Yeah, she's a little underbaked, I think, but the performance is pretty good.
Yeah, I think she as an actress is pretty solid. She like the stuff she had to do in this one, I thought was handled with the correct amount of freaked out and kind of like I can't stop sweating.
Yeah. A lot of eye makeup on here to make
contacts and stuff, and but I think it's a really interesting idea, and I kind of wish it had been more.
Which idea? Sorry, the Kes.
Oh, sorry, just the general pregnancy on the ship. How do we how and when do we start thinking about continuing procreation and like the conversations that
how much making
Chakotay,
out in the turbo lift does Chakotay have to put up with?
Yeah, like the conversation with Chakotay and Janeway was interesting. It seems like they might be positioning the two of them to to have a thing.
Well, I was wondering, I feel like every conversation or a lot of the conversations in this feel like they have sexual undertones to them. And I didn't know if like this is an intentional thing where it's dealing thematically with that. Like Janeway and Chakotay are very clearly set up that way with the way that they block them, where they're kind of like whispering to each other and sort of like giving each other the elevator eyes and stuff like that. But it gets a little bit silly when, Tuvok at the end is like, it appears we've lost our sex appeal, Captain. And it goes down that road. But I feel one of the things that I like about it is that I do think that the episode as a whole embraces what it's talking about. It just doesn't do it particularly well. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think centering it on Neelix and Kes might not be the strongest thing.
Yeah.
But the idea in general is interesting. How do you feel about the space worm aspect?
It's boring.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Galaxy's Child TNG episode where the Enterprise runs into the parent spaceborne thing and it kills it, and then it has to like the kid follows it around. The cult follows the ship around, thinking it's the parent.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember.
Because that's also an energy draining thing where it would attach itself to the ship. I mean, the one thing I liked about it is that they did tie it into the sex theme that was going on. So like the aliens were reacting in a way that was mating ritual, and Chakotay's been studying up on that, and everyone's very, very proud that Chakotay knows all about the sex lives of space worms and stuff. But outside of that, it was it felt like a retread, and it wasn't particularly interesting in the first place. It was just one of these stock sci-fi B plots that gets paired onto some of these episodes.
Yeah, I wish I wish when the big voluptuous female space worm showed up, Tom Paris is like, I get it.
He brings it a salad and says, let's go do something else over here. Was that the way that they ended up with it? Was the female the big one, or was the male? Did they ever decide that? I think they just kind of switch it all the way through the episode.
Yeah, I forget. I think they implied that the big one was the female because the males usually the males were doing more like showing off.
Performative.
And that's generally something.
Yeah.
I will say, what did kind of creep me out is that they took the opportunity to remind us that Kes is only 2 years old.
Yeah, it's the other weird. Like, this is her first period, essentially. Yeah, and Neelix needs to get in there.
Which, like, is it like a longer year? Does it take longer for them to go around their sun or something? Is that the idea, or do they just age faster?
No, I think they're on Earth years. So the weird sort of nonsense about her is that she only lives for a couple years, but she only gets pregnant once. Too. So
yeah,
unless she gives birth to 1,000 baby Neelixes, which is a pretty horrible sight. It's kind of a strange species. I don't know.
It was just a really odd conversation when she's like, when I think Neelix is like, but why can that happen? You're only 2. This shouldn't happen till you're 5 at least. And I was like, without the visuals.
Yeah,
this is kind of hard to.
It's another knock on Neelix too. Really, that it's like
it is like it makes him. It just really makes him look like a shithead, kind of.
Yeah. He's not very fairly set up by the writers. The character itself is obviously, it's not really a performance issue. It's more like just the character set up badly. But he's set up in almost every way that it's almost impossible for an actor to make this character likable. Really, just from who he's set up with in a relationship to the way that he acts to his role on the ship and stuff like that. It's tough. The thing that I do like is I do like Janeway's figuring out the ship. Like even on it's one of these things. It's another one where I like it, but it still misfires a little bit. Like at the ending scene where that ensign who has been so prominent that you're wondering why she's been so prominent so far, then she comes in and reveals that she's not cheating. She hasn't been cheating on her husband who's left behind. Her husband definitely impregnated her however long ago, even though they've been in space for 6 months or whatever. She's pregnant. But the problem is that like going out on that note feels like it's just left hanging because they're not going to come back to that. So it doesn't feel like it resolves the story or gives you anything interesting to think about, except for the fact that one woman there is sort of able, through some exposition, able to show you why some of the crew would want to have kids, because it's, as she says, it's the only way that she can remember her husband at that before they get home, which is good. That's all the good stuff. I just wish it wasn't so pushed to the back of this one.
Yeah, especially when, like, theoretically, the idea that they're having kids on this ship should really be like a paradigm shifting change for Voyager.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, this should be like what at the end of the first season of the X-Files when they break up the X-Files. It's a big change that they have to figure out how to hang with. But
They're
I'm
moving
assuming,
from coworkers to family, essentially.
right,
Yeah.
right, which is a really interesting move to make. Honestly, it would be kind of fun to play that out and see what happens. But then you got to hire a bunch of stupid kids to be on your show.
Yeah. Just keep them babies for their entire existence on the ship.
Yeah, that's when you jump forward like 5 years or something. But yeah, I'm not expecting this to come back, and who knows if that woman ever has the baby?
Right?
Who's to say? Maybe it will come back. Maybe it won't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the lack of it's a script that feels a little bit childish in that way, because I do think and maybe the show just isn't built for it, but I do think that it's a serious conversation that Janeway needs to have, and I think that the show that involves Janeway's decision about it needs to have a little bit more of a fundamental like a clarity about what her decision is there, like what the pros and cons of both of these things are.
Yeah.
Because I think they just short shrift it by her not really having any opinion until the very end when she talks to that ensign. And
even there though, it's not like she really. What is she going to say? Go to the doctor, go to sickbay immediately and take the pill or something?
Yeah, I know. There's that. I mean, but that's the. So in a better episode, I could see Janeway coming to the decision that in order to keep the ship professional and get everyone home, she can't allow that to happen. But talking to that ensign is the thing that makes her realize that this is not really possible on this ship anymore.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's a Janeway-centric episode, which this is not. Like, she doesn't even, like you're saying, she doesn't even make a decision, really. It's just sort of like something that she's casually thinking about.
Yeah.
Like the stuff... I don't even really feel like the stuff with Kes or the stuff with the space slugs in any way convinces her one way or the other whether or not this is a good idea.
Right.
It's just what else do you say when someone comes in and tells you you're pregnant, tells you that they are pregnant?
Yeah. She could be the hardliner boss who's like, you don't get any time off. You just have to work right through this. We're not so enlightened after all, you and I. Yeah, it's too bad. I'm just thinking here, I'm looking through my notes. We talked about Cote and Janeway, considering the sex life. I could focus on Tuvok again. Apologies too. For some reason, like the airplanes are going crazy over my house tonight, and there's a lot of motorcycles. But I like the Tuvok scene. I feel like that's another kind of episode that they haven't really done effectively yet, which is to they did it in a couple things in the first season, but to like really effectively show that people miss home and what they're missing and stuff like that. And I just thought that was a unique conversation because it kind of shows Neelix is set up as being an ignoramus when Tuvok tells him that because Neelix not having any kids has these already like predetermined ideas about what he's going to do with his son that he's assuming he's going to have.
Right.
And Tuvok has a nice like
erotic techniques.
Erotic techniques and the Seinfeld line about the counterclockwise swirl and stuff like that. I think is going to be something. Tuvok just has nice responses there, I think. And he further just shows like why I like the Vulcans when they're written this way, because they can really highlight character issues in other characters in a way that is like true to them in the way that they talk about stuff. They're just like this mirror that other characters can look at to either figure out what they really think or see another perspective about something. I think Tuvok's effective in it here. I think he has good dialogue about his kids and what he misses, and good acting from Tim Russ, who manages to portray all that stuff.
Yeah, Tim Russ continues to be, the best Vulcan this side of Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah,
he does a really great job, and yeah, he gets across a lot without doing much at all. I know that sounds like I'm underselling it, but you know what I mean.
It's what that race needs, I think.
Whoa!
What's that?
Whoa! Cool it down.
Did I miss
talking about? That's what that race needs. Jesus Christ!
Oh, those people, you know what they are. They get their sticky hands, and you have to hold them for 50 hours to impregnate them or something. Nothing else about Kes, really. We talked about the space worms too. They get drawn into that. Oh, I don't.
Did you like when Voyager gets cucked out by the by showing its belly?
Tom Paris, that's some nice beta piloting you got there, buddy. He's like, I know. I had.
You
to
seem
do it.
too good at that, Tom.
Tom made that ship go limp rather quickly and got it accomplished. I noticed one thing that really differentiated this show from TNG in particular, although DS9 is probably the same way. Enterprise, no, I could see Enterprise doing this actually. I would never expect to see in TOS, TNG, and DS9 the ship ram into something in space and it bounces off of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That doesn't feel like a TNG thing. That feels like a Voyager and Enterprise thing that they would do all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
There's no
it
impact.
was worth a shot.
No impact anything. When TNG crashes the ship, it's like a 10-minute long sequence of the ship just being ripped apart as it crashes into something, you know?
Well, I mean, in this case, there was a giant space slug, so it was going to bounce off of it.
Had a sound
I did
effect.
have some.
It was like boink.
Yeah. I did have some issues with, it's so fascinating to me seeing how these shows handle size relationship. I've talked about this many times where it's, two ships on the screen. Yeah, scale.
Yeah.
And as I was watching this one, when the gigantic slug comes into screen, it kind of comes in from the side. And I was thinking, this kind of makes sense, this angle, because it looks like it's enveloping, it's like eclipsing Voyager. But the problem is you are in a full 3-dimensional space of these things floating everywhere.
Yeah.
So there's not a real good indication that this thing is not just closer to the camera.
Correct.
And
yeah.
I feel like it ran into a couple spots like that where I was like, well, if they had this thing come in behind Voyager, then you can see, oh, it's bigger than Voyager and also behind Voyager, which means it's just naturally bigger than Voyager. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you do it in the front, you kind of lose that sense of scale because of, like I said, because
the camera, you don't know where it is compared to the Voyager.
And they did that a few times. I think they got it right a couple times, but it's always, it never ceases to fascinate me to see how they handle this stuff. Sometimes it's an easy fix. Sometimes it's not so easy. So it's always interesting to me.
My example of that was that I think it's a lesson to be learned for these shows. When they have the script and then they do the post-production, they should probably avoid being too descriptive in dialogue about what is going on outside the ship. So in terms of your scale thing, when they're describing these things, they're like, it's a cloud X number of, distance wide, like thousands of kilometers wide, but it's only X number of things in it. And the things in it are moving at like 4,000 kilometers an hour, something like that. Yeah. But when you see the special effects of it, they're just swimming fish things around them.
Right.
There's no matchup between what they're describing is out there and what the special effects team has to make it look like to make it have any kind of sense to the viewer, Yeah,
I wish it was just like, look, Captain, look at that. And then Janeway goes, yes, that's wild.
This is some weird, wild stuff, guys. Just say, don't describe them. Don't go into sci-fi detail about how fast they're moving and stuff like that. Just be like, this is a weird cloud of energy-sucking vampire fish creature things that we have to get through.
Well, I mean, they did have that one moment where they were kind of comparing it to amoebas and relating it to something, which that stuff makes sense. But yeah, I think there's probably a sweet spot in there where you can kind of, you don't have to be too descriptive, but you get across what you need and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I guess the final question before we go to the patron thoughts and stuff. Do you think this one this is an episode about sex. This is Star Trek. Star Trek traditionally doesn't handle sex very well. Is this maybe one of the best actually sex-themed episodes that any of the shows have ever done? Because maybe that's a spoiler for our thoughts about it at the end, but I thought that it didn't really embarrass itself in a way that a lot of Star Trek episodes can with this stuff.
No, it didn't. It was probably one of the better sex themes episodes, but at the same time, I think the reason that it managed to do that is because it's not really about sex. It's about procreation.
Yeah.
But it's not like a sexy episode,
Yeah.
So that's where I feel like they get into trouble, is when it's like, what's his name?
Paris?
No.
Riker?
No. The other one.
Tom Riker?
No, the Enterprise.
Jim Kirk?
No, the show Enterprise.
Oh, Archer, Trip?
It's not Trip going down and not realizing he's getting impregnated by a sexy alien or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it's a more thoughtful discussion about the consequences of procreating on a small ship, And so I feel like that even the Kes stuff, it's not sexy. And it's not even romantic. Like the way that they're talking about children is not romantic. It's just, it gets romantic when Neelix starts daydreaming about it, but Kes is not approaching this from a romantic standpoint.
Maybe that's my failing of it then, because if you want this to be about procreation and sort of like the aspect of having kids, I don't think that the show ever really digs into that in any meaningful way. Trying to think about all the storylines here, how that works out.
At least, I was just going to say, at least they don't do it the way like TOS would do it, where it's like, this is an episode about the consequences of sex on a starship. So maybe they go through a nebula and it makes everybody insanely horny to the point where they can't do their jobs.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I think I wanted Voyager to exist in that world where it could have. It's the show set up for those kind of real conversations that doesn't need a sci-fi thing pushing it from the side. And I know that the show is in the series and the franchise isn't really out of that realm. It's like that's too big of a leap for what this one is going to do for that to be possible. But I really thought that it would have done a lot better if it just had more serious conversations about that. And if you're going to talk about the kids, it all had to be like the Tuvok stuff and the Janeway stuff. And it was confusing it with a little bit like the alien sci-fi plot was about sex and sex appeal. It was about like the mating ritual stuff.
Yes.
So it was a little bit disjointed there where you're kind of applying too many different angles on one thing. And I think they would have been better either way, I guess. If you want to separate them, I don't know if I would want to focus on that sci-fi B plot, but at least if you're going to do the kids, at least make it a more serious, thoughtful episode than this one turned out to be.
Even the sci-fi B plot, though, while more about sex, it's about sex in like a nature video kind of way.
Yeah, in a like baser instincts kind of way,
right?
Humans do the same thing. We are performative for sex stuff and things like that.
Yeah, you gotta do peacocking.
That's right.
You gotta wear a big hat.
Peacocking.
Wear a big hat.
Big with some glasses. Yeah.
carry a yo-yo.
Yep.
Do some close-up magic or something.
Don't do card tricks. Never failed. There's some YouTube video of someone saying that they were in college young and used card tricks to impress the ladies at parties, and he said he was deeply embarrassed about it to this day. And I would have to agree. At least he's self-aware at this point to realize that that's the case. But yeah, like
I went to a party one time. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I went to a party. I feel like it was a UMass party. I don't know if you were there. I don't remember. But somebody's brother who was there was a magician.
This sounds vaguely familiar.
And he was like he was right around our age or so. And so like at a certain point in the party, the guy had his brother perform to the best of his abilities at a college party, and he was good, but
not good enough.
Well, no, he was good, but I couldn't help but feel like this was somehow making fun of him, even though even though this was something he was legitimately good at. And like, I don't know if it was the speed at which he was rifling through all these tricks he could do, but something about this felt like your brother is forcing you to do this. And now you have to perform basic magic tricks in front of a house full of drunk college kids.
Yeah.
This is not going to do you any favors, no matter how good you are.
Well, do you think his brother was trying to embarrass him? Like, there's a lot of layers you can have.
That's the
there.
question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if his brother was like, my brother is an awesome magician, and I really want, it's like when you're
do your tricks, pussy.
Yeah. Well, it's like, if you play an instrument when you're a kid, right? And then it's like you go to somebody's house and they have a piano, and then your mother's like, oh, go play the piano. Show them how good you are at the piano.
Sure.
You're like, Ma, I don't want to fucking play the piano for these people. I don't. Go play something. And then there's an embarrassment level built into that, even though from the mom's standpoint, she's not trying to embarrass you.
Right.
I don't know if it was that. I don't know if the brother was actively trying to embarrass him. I don't know.
Or legitimately impressed by his magic skills.
Yeah. He was pretty good, though, from what I remember.
I vaguely remember that. Did he have a fold-up wand?
I hope so.
The
only thing I remember...
That's what I remember.
The only thing I remember is he did that, like, endless rope trick.
Sure.
And I was... I was standing at an angle where I was actively trying to figure out how he did everything. And I couldn't, so he was good at his job.
We'll have to find that guy, get him on the podcast, and see why he did that, why he was doing all those magic tricks. My final thing before we go is just that, if it's about because I could have seen an episode where the sci-fi plot stays the same, where it's about this sort of peacocking, like sex, gender differences, where it's like they perform differently and they have different sort of expectations and different responsibilities and different actions and stuff. If they had tied it into then I could accept Tom Paris's role in this whole thing, right? If Tom Paris is having a competition with Neelix in the same way that the space worms are having a competition, I think that's thematically sound and somewhat interesting there. And I think that you can talk about stuff, but that's the difference, I guess. That's where the episode gets a little bit too mushy, is it combines too many different ideas at that point.
Yeah, I think you could do a thing where while they are in a disagreement over having a child, Kes is like, fine, I'll go get somebody else.
Yeah,
and then she starts like, putting the moves on Paris, and he's weirded out by
it. It is a bit unusual that Kes is not super horny for everybody, any male. She's in control of herself enough to remain within her relationship, and horrible decision as it is, she's decided to go with Neelix.
I do appreciate that though, because I mean, like, we've already got Ponfar here.
Yeah.
Do we really need another female of an alien species to just be insatiably horny when she's ready to have kids?
Mrs. Phlox too. It happens after this, but Mrs. Phlox is just down to fuck all the time. Everything is like that.
That's their whole species, though. I give that one a pass because, like, Dr. Phlox is constantly DTF as well. Yeah. He just kind of keeps it hidden a little bit better.
It's true. Well, I applaud Voyager for not embarrassing themselves. So let's go to.
I maybe that was Jerry Taylor's influence, where she was like,
she locked Berman's office. She's just locked in there.
We can't just have her be horny. That's not what happens. Treat her with some respect here.
Treat this absurd character. I feel Jerry Taylor's.
Don't listen to her, Brandon. Brandon,
unlock the door. Just
do the original script. Open the door.
Yeah, I feel Jerry Taylor is Taylor becomes showrunner eventually for a couple seasons anyway, so we'll see how things change there. But I do feel that.
Brandon, we're going to fix this. We have our own show. We're going to have a smoking hot smoking hot Vulcan on there, and oh my gosh, she's gonna go through bonfire. It's like you would never believe. We're gonna put her in a room with the sexy horned up doctor, and oh my god, glitter, decontamination glitter all over the walls.
Oh, Enterprise. I guess we should have waited to do it after Voyager. It would have made more sense. Let's go to patron thoughts here. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show. Patreon.com/The Pensky File. If you want to support us, go there. Patreon.com/The Pensky File. You get to leave your comments on upcoming episodes. You get to listen to exclusive content. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And as always, our Captain Tier supporters get a special thank you. So special thanks to Ben Douglas, Tark Latif, Andrew Boudreau, Christian Boudreau. We're still doing this. Joint Mango, Kyle Boudreau, Mike Burnett, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Sean, Bradley Kilns, Brandon Boudreau, Vault 13 Hero, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Oach, Stefan Min, HH28, Darth Moss, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jig123, Patrick Sieba, Dave Davies, Poindexter G, Barry Wallace, Jamie Crow, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanchuan, Jacques Aguirre, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Nick the Rat, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardeur, Garoppolo, John Zorn, Tom Hickey, Captain Munchausen, Celestine Champollion de Boudreau, Jonas Boudreau, Tuvix Must Die, Dizbrada, Chris McLaughlin, Royo, Admiral Nakamura, Cleffy Boudreau, Ed Mark Starr. And then the second page here is Jeremy Boudreau. I will never abandon that one. J-Man, the undiscovered Mugatu Boudreau, Robbie Duffield, Will Clay, Atango Boudreau, Artorias, Zaylen Maru, Jaron Hatch, and John Ailman. Stopping off there with a good, strong English name to wrap things up.
I still like Cleffy Boudreau. That's probably my favorite. But the rest of them feel like, someone in 2020 asking the DJ to play Gangnam Style as a joke or something. I assume it's just because we did this so quick they forgot to change their name back.
Yes. Cleffy is I don't know, makes me think of Clefairy from Pokemon. Cleffy Boudreau is like what Clefairy signs into hotel names in is something. Let's go to patron comments for
Cleffy Boudreau is like a silent era comedian.
Patron comments for Elogium. The first one is...
His gimmick is like he's got an ice cream cart that he pushes around that he always ends up falling face first into or something.
Cleffy Boudreau says, Elogium, this episode's all about sex and the babies that may happen next. There's one good Tuvok scene and the rest shouldn't have been because it's really bad writing for Kes. 1 dirt dinner out of 5. Kyle Barrett is our next one. Clay, I'm going to send it to you because we'll alternate because that keeps things lively. This is Kyle Boudreau with Elogium.
Good Lord, a 6-day sex session, or as Sting calls it, foreplay. Sorry, I kind of stepped on that. Or as Sting calls it, foreplay. Cleffy Boudreau would have delivered that flawlessly. I don't know why everyone was excited about the possibility of Tarantino directing a Star Trek film when he was obviously just going to make a 3-hour adaptation of this episode with most of the runtime dedicated to the foot massage. Apparently, the episode was supposed to be a parable about teenage pregnancy, but the idea that Kes thinks this is the only time she can get pregnant is such a big sci-fi addition that it negates any possible application to real life, and therefore all it amounts to is Kes acting goofy and Neelix acting exceedingly cunty. I also don't buy that raising a child on a starship is still a big deal. Haven't these people heard of legendary boomer Travis Mayweather? 2 episode saving Tuvok scenes out of 5.
Yep. Yeah, there's a foot massage in this one. Neelix isn't sticking his tongue in the holiest of holies and giving doctors giving a foot massage. Norman Buckwald says, Elogium, the one where Kes must copulate before it's too late. Otherwise, the Ocampans will become extinct sooner, and Voyager loses its sex appeal. 1 dirt feast out of 5. Wes Derlin says, I'll read this one just because it's quick. I find this episode almost, if not more absurd than another infamous episode, Threshold, coming up this season. A species which can only have 1 offspring that lives 9 years is doomed. I don't know why the caretaker felt so guilty. Nature seems to have already done a number on the Ocampa. 0 out of 5.
Well, do we know it's only 1? Like, what if it's like a spider situation?
That's what I would have to assume. I don't know if they ever prove this or not, but we'll see.
That's terrifying. Does Neelix know that?
No, I know. They have to, she has to put out a tremendous number of offspring to make this make any sense. Poindexter G says, Elogium.
How do the Akampa even survive? Species with short lifespans need to breed like rabbits, not once a lifetime. One child per couple doesn't even sustain the population. This makes no damn sense. The highlight of the episode is Tuvok's talk with Neelix. We see how, even though he explains it with cold Vulcan logic, he misses his family terribly and longs to be reunited with them. The plot with the space creature has an interesting end, but there's really nothing else to like here.
Benjamin Espinoza says, Captain, it appears we've lost our sex appeal, says Tuvok. About sums up this weird and wacky episode. At least this is the first one in Season 2 that actually felt like Voyager, complete with nice Janeway-Chakotay sidebars about procreation. Good subjects that logically would need to be discussed. And we get the start of the Naomi Wildman arc. Oh, my goodness, the Stenson must come back. I assume that's Naomi Wildman.
Okay.
Yes, she has an arc. And she's a bit of a fan favorite, especially when Seven comes on board. Oh, my goodness, she's...
Wow.
Is she pregnant for 5 seasons of the show? If only there wasn't so much Neelix in this one. 3 foot massages out of 5. I didn't know that.
Did you notice they gave her the exact same hairdo as
Jane? I thought she was coming in to discuss the problem that their haircuts were too similar to each other.
Yeah. She looked like the blonde alternate skin of Janeway if you were picking her character in a fighting game.
This is Brandon Boudreau. I'm going to send this to you right now.
The only reason this episode is worth watching is for Tuvok's Captain, it appears we've lost our sex appeal line, which made me laugh out loud. But the very idea of Neelix and Kes's offspring is scary as fuck, and Neelix is not only jealous and clingy, but sexist as well. This episode is noteworthy for the start of the Naomi Wildman arc. Even I ate dirt as a little kid. 2.5 horny space creatures out of 5.
I'm curious. I hope I don't get spoiled about what this arc is for this woman. This will be fascinating. Changeling says, in some ways, pregnancy is the ultimate bully. Kicks you in the stomach. Do not kick pregnant people in the stomach. Messes with your emotions. It makes you eat bugs. I got nothing out of this episode. Neelix is unlikable. The Ocampa reproduction cycle makes no sense. B-plot is just nonsense. And when that happens, my mind wanders into weird places. When Chakotay suggested they act submissive, I have expected someone to pipe up, tickle his balls, 1 hand of frozen orange juice crystals out of 5.
Quick, Captain, can we fit that giant ball gag into the front of the Voyager?
Act submissive. We are, this is where I cue in the Bloodhound Gang song. All right, so here is, who is this? This is Artorias about Elogium.
In the long story of Trek, there comes a time ever so often when certain episodes make history. Unfortunately, this is the story of a ship that has to hold the proverbial soap in prison, so to speak, turning blue in the process and losing its sex appeal, the only good thing to come out of this episode, while getting dominated by a giant slug. Mm-hmm. The only thing more unappealing than this episode is the idea of Ocampan sex. I'm amazed their species hasn't died out yet. 1 slimy blue tadpole out of 5. I'm surprised that this is so negative for a lot of people.
Yeah, people don't like it. Aaron Million says, Elogium. While Neelix's conversation with Tuvok was good because of the insight we got into Tuvok being a dad, this episode was subpar. What else to expect when Kes and Neelix are the stars of one? One enjoyable moment when the doctor kicks Neelix out of sickbay. Too bad he can't kick him off the ship. 1 hungry Kes out of 5. This is Groppler John Zorn coming at you. Yeah, it is. It has been a negative response to it so far. We'll read more, and I think I have some thoughts about Patreon comments too. Go ahead. This is Groppler John Zorn.
While the bridge nonsense is boring nonsense, the Kes nonsense is at least kitschily entertaining nonsense along the lines of Threshold, Spock's Brain, and Sub Rosa. Sub Rosa is a much better episode than this.
I like Spock's Brain. I like Spock's Brain, too.
The space plot seems like it was written for TNG, except the writers very much picked the wrong characters as corollaries. Torres is unconvincing, insisting the what the fuck of the week is hostile, and Chakotay is extra unconvincing with Data's wonky science lines. At least this doesn't seem out of character, as the writers have already implemented their clearly outlined plan to turn Chakotay into a loyal Starfleet rebel leader with both strong and weak leadership skills, and expertise or lack of expertise in whatever is or isn't required to move the scene forward or not.
He is all over the place in terms of what he can do.
Yeah. I was going to say this episode would have been perfect for some of that bullshit fake Native American stuff, but I'm surprised that they didn't have something in there. This is also the best Neelix episode we're going to get at this point for what the character has been given to work with. If I enjoyed the feeling of squeezing poop between my fingers, I'd give this a 5, but let's go with another 2.
Yeah, Chakotay's I'm almost half expecting, like, while things are going horrible on Voyager and the camera's shaking and the ship's under attack, someone to start screaming, like, what do your eagle friends tell us now, Chakotay, kind of stuff. Like, it feels like it's building towards that. But he is he's an interesting, is this script a holdover? I think it is. I think the script is a holdover from the first season, but it does, I never really realized it until reading that comment from Garoppolo John Zorn, but it does feel like some of the characters have been given the wrong dialogue for what they are in this one. That's an interesting point. It's like early in the series and you weren't sure who says the lines yet at that point.
Yeah.
This is, did you just read that one? You did. Jonathan J.K. Morris says, Elogium, I think they made too much out of Kes's ability to be fertile. Too many zany things for such a species. Good to see the Klingon purple blood put to good use again. 1 foot massage out of 5. Jaron Hatch says, this is one of those Star Trek titillates us with another species exotic mating practices episodes, and shocker, does nothing interesting with it. There's definitely potential in this story where the crew has to grapple with the notion of having kids during their long voyage home, but when the writers bafflingly decide to spend most of the episode's runtime with Neelix and the cold feet he gets at the prospect of becoming a parent, they somehow manage to sideline Kes in their own episode, and I'm not sure if that's a blessing or a curse. At least we're spared from a conclusion that sees the two characters consummating their relationship. Nightmare fuel, indeed. 2 parental foot rubs out of 5.
I kind of wish that they had decided to go through with it. So for the next like half a season, they're all like, "Where's Neelix and Kes? They're day 5."
Yeah, it's a long one. Sting is their coach. This is the Matthew N. Ross comment.
The sex episode with the best unintentionally funny line from a Vulcan commenting on the loss of the ship and crew's sex appeal being the one highlight, the alien blobs not so much. If there was ever a moment where Neelix suddenly realized that Kes was not compatible with him, it's here. Pretty gross from the tongue swelling, the weird gooey webbing, the bug eating, I'll pass. The fraternization of the crew seems like what would happen, but Chakotay, he'll be friend-zoned by everyone. The groundwork for the Ensign Wildman's child is set up and adds a sense of sadness of being stuck far away. I'm glad to hear that they follow through with this.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because it does very much feel like something like on TNG that would be the stinger at the end of an episode and they never bring it up again.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I honestly wasn't expecting this. Jonas says, Elogium. Why Elogium? The Oxford English Dictionary defines Elogium as a, quote, characterization, usually in a favorable sense, a eulogy. So is there some sort of eulogy in this episode for Kes's unborn child? Is the eulogy the episode itself? At one point, Kes accuses Neelix of selfishness due to his circumspection over whether or not to reproduce, as if being less circumspect were somehow less selfish. The episode suffers beyond its inherent badness for having followed projections. The less said, the better. 1 out of 5. We've already read that one. Royo says, Royo says this. He says, it's a V at the start. I just cut it off. The
Bart. The horny episode reminds me a lot of Deep Space Nine's fascination when Lwaxana Troi made everyone horny, made Quark come on to Keiko.
Keiko.
I don't know if I've ever seen it written out like that. Keiko and Jake come on to Kira. There are some hard questions to ask, such as whether or not Voyager should be expected to become a generational ship, but Neelix is too insufferable to make this a tolerable episode. And were the writers trying to make the Ocampa not function as a race by having a biological negative population growth? If only Tuvok would strangle Neelix to death, everything would be better. Ugh, skip. 1.5 out of 5. How much does it bother you that the math doesn't work for the Ocampa?
Doesn't bother me really. The more I don't like the word problematic. The weirder thing about it is Kes's age is a bigger issue for me.
Yeah.
Like the constant referencing that she's too young to know what she's doing is a bad way to go about things. And then just to highlight it by saying she's only 2 years old is just weird. The negative population thing is more just like an interesting point to me, but it's not really vital. If it was a better episode, I wouldn't care.
It is kind of weird that she doesn't know what's happening to her at the start, but as soon as Janeway's like, "You're going through puberty," she immediately is like, "Oh, I know every single in and out of how procreation works for my species, so let's do this."
Yeah, it's almost a confusing setup. It left me wondering what the truth was. I wasn't convinced that she was telling the truth at that part, because I've been.
Oh, so you think she's trying to just trick Neelix into having a baby?
He doesn't need to know. A Latte Librarian says, Elogium, the one good part in this episode is the scene between Janeway and Kes where they have the "your body is changing" talk. That was actually sweet in a mother-daughter way. The rest had a lot of potential, but they trashed it by focusing on fuckboy Neelix. 1 out of 5. Is this the first one? This is the first one. We already read this. Have we read this one? Yes, we did. Thanks, everybody, for... Did we read Tactile Bear? It's hard to imagine something more awkward than a Vulcan trying to have a sexual intercourse lest they explode, but here we are with Kes needing a foot massage from her dad so she can give birth. What a weird episode. I did read that, I think. Thanks, everybody, for commenting on this episode. It's much appreciated. Pretty negative from the listeners there, Clay. I'm not nearly as negative on it. I don't know. What's your sense of the? Would you say that the listeners didn't like it because of the? Trying to see here. Mostly just not really living up to the concept, I guess, which I agree with. Not really like focusing on this procreation thing.
I don't know, because that doesn't seem to be something that they call out in the comments.
And just clicking through, yeah.
Most of the criticism seems to be leveled at Neelix being a jerk and the Ocampan, the math of the reproductive system. Because I think that's where you and I differ with them, is that I feel like for both of us, the idea that they're playing with here is actually pretty good. It's just that the focus is kind of in the wrong place, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with Neelix. I can go there. I think it's less about the construction of it and more just that they didn't really super focus on the aspect that I would prefer to have seen. But at the same time, I don't think this one embarrassed itself. So that's it for the patrons. Patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to support the show and leave some comments about the upcoming episodes. Go there and do that. Let's go to our final thoughts, Clay. What'd you think about this one? This is I'll go first, I guess. I thought that this is one of those weird, semi-hard to talk about episodes. Because I don't think it really... It's not horrible. It's not great. It has some interesting things to it. But it also doesn't really go interesting... It doesn't go deep in what's interesting about it enough to make talking about it super effective. They don't really get into the stuff that I would have wanted to see, which would be, even if they didn't accomplish what they were talking about, it's something for us to talk about. This sits somewhere in that uncomfortable middle ground where it's not really baked enough to be ready to serve, but it's also not a complete disaster at the same time. I'm going to give it a 2, I think.
Yeah.
But I didn't dislike it, really. I just think it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that thing that's missing is what I was talking about before, where they set up the whole crux of the episode around Neelix and Kes having to make this choice, and then they make the choice off screen, and you never really get to. They don't ever really grapple with the choice, and so it kind of makes everything kind of feel like a bit of a exercise in futility, because they're bringing up some interesting things, but they're not doing anything interesting with it, and they ultimately sidestep having to have any real conversation or a real decision or consequences born from it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it feel so unsatisfying, is because it just kind of what it ultimately boils down to is, man, it would be wild if they had to have a baby.
Right.
And that's kind of it. Like there's no real grappling with that in any real way that feels like they've gotten into the idea in any real way.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm coming to this late now at the end of the episode, but I think that's something that kind of irritates me about it, and I wonder what you think. Because coming from my perspective, their decision about whether or not to have a child is in the discussion that these characters are having is one of the least interesting ways to discuss having a child, really.
Yes.
It's like there's no trade-off or negatives, really. They're not balancing anything in this episode. What they're really having to do is decide, do we want to fuck now? You know,
right. Yes.
So there's not a, it's not a, are we running out of resources? It's not tying into the Voyager of like, what does it mean to bring more people onto the ship in a mission that we don't know whether or not this is going to succeed. It's not about, do we love each other enough to have a kid or anything like that? Like, so it's the worst case scenario for a discussion about having a kid. And I think that's a big problem with it. But I was wondering if maybe for some people that's all that you need for that discussion is whether or not they should at that point. But I think just for my experience for having the kids, it's a much more, it's a deeper conversation than that. Like, this is the worst kind of case that you could have. And sorry to realize that at the end of the podcast, but that's maybe the fundamental thing about the Neelix stuff that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, because, I mean, they start the episode with Janeway going like, geez, people might start having kids. This might impact the ship. And then when they actually get to a point where someone might have a kid, they never even broach that subject.
Right, yeah.
You know, so like you're saying, there's no, it's only about the personal decision of these two characters, which doesn't really make it that interesting to put into a science fiction show.
Yeah.
Other than, man, their mating ritual sounds gross and weird.
Right. Yeah, and that's the undoing to me. That's what I think Kyle said it in the comments. That sci-fi angle is a distraction, I think, from things. So,
yeah.
All right, we'll both give it 2s out of 5 for Elogium. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you for supporting the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. Much appreciated. I don't know what we're doing on there now, but we'll probably have some more coverage of something that's coming out. But we have to recuperate after all the Strange New Worlds and Picard coverage, and then we'll come back with some other stuff. So, thanks very much for listening there. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
I started watching The Boys the other day, and I find it distracting how much Jack Quaid, who also does the voice of Boimler on
Lower Decks,
how much he looks like his dad, Dennis Quaid.
Oh, it's Dennis Quaid's kid?
Yeah.
Oh.
If you might not realize it if you don't know that, but once you know that, you like can't unsee it.
Okay.
He looks exactly like his dad. Yeah, we've got a Rotten Heart Picture Show is still going. We're on a bit of a hiatus with Badass, but I think Sean and I are going to come back and do an episode after both issues of Red Hood come out, which should be the end of August. And Amanda and I are still trucking away with the second string of Stephen King on Patreon. So check that out too.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with Twisted, the episode called Twisted. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for leaving your comments. We'll see you on the Discord. We'll see you around the galaxy. All right, we're done. See you next week with Twisted.